I bought the iPad mini after not having an iPad mini for many years. I think before I bought the iPad mini 7, I think the iPad mini 4 was maybe the last one that I had. So anyway, I'd always kind of coveted the iPad mini, but I hadn't bought one for a long time. And I was craving the smaller form factor, I thought. Something that's a little bigger than a Kindle Oasis for reading and that kind of thing. Something that's a little bigger than my iPhone for content consumption, but also with a little bit more juice that's going to allow me to do other things, light work like writing and that kind of thing. Something that I could do anywhere because it was the iPad mini. That would allow me to get away from my Mac Studio. I don't have a MacBook anymore right now. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. And it was extremely frustrating, like sort of that same feeling as you can almost remember the word that you're trying to say, but you can't quite remember it, and it just won't happen. I mean, because in so many ways, the iPad mini seems like the perfect iPad. Not too big, not too small, just right. Like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears perfect iPad, right? Porridge. That's what I'm talking about. The size was great for the reading experience. I could hold it in my hand. It was just what I was looking for. But I found handwriting on it with the Apple Pencil almost impossible. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a screen that's made for writing like that. I tried to use writing apps and do that light work that I wanted to do, but it was kind of impossible. Using it as a desktop screen just didn't work for me at all. I mean, video editing, anything like that, I didn't even try. I'm fully aware that there are other folks out there who have completely contradictory takes on this device, and far be it from me to tell them that they are wrong, but for me, the iPad mini is what a lot of iPads are. Those kind of Goldilocks devices where they seem like they're going to be perfect, but one's too big, one's too small. You see what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying? The mini is too small. The 11 inches are not big enough, but the 13-inch is too big, etc., etc. And that makes me question the whole iPad concept. When the iPad launched, it was a bigger screen that made consuming video and reading and all of their content consumption a better experience than on the 4-inch iPhone screen of the time. And it was fairly good at that. It didn't have to be all that much of a thing. As the iPad developed, the lines started to blur. There were some really great apps made just for the iPad that you couldn't get for the Mac, like Notability and other iPad-specific apps, visual art apps, games, and writing apps. They were great for the iPad. They didn't exist on the Mac. But even though that's the case, the iPad has never seemed to be able to leap over the barrier of being a machine that you could use full-time functionally. The iPad Pro models are as powerful as any M4 loaded Mac now, but in the form of an iPad. Even given the unique features and use cases it contains, it remains an in-between device. One of the most powerful devices that Apple sells is a device that you can't utilize all the power on. Where a Mac can perform just about any task, and if need be, you can kind of get down deep into it and work things out, and Mac OS has developed an extensive and vibrant ecosystem around it, and there are Macs of various shapes, sizes, and formats that meet almost everyone's needs. The iPad remains stuck. It has never really left its roots of I'm a good device for content consumption, and fully made the leap into into I am a computer you could use every day. With every upgrade, it gets faster, the screens get better. Right now, the iPad Pros have the best screen of any Apple device anywhere. They make small changes to the operating system in some areas of functionality, but the experience is still pretty much the same as it was back in the early days. It's an embiggened iPhone. Yes, they've decided to call it iPad OS, and it does a few things different than iOS. They have offered a few very lame multitasking options, the Apple Pencil and the Magic Keyboards, but none of those things really solve the problem. The question with the iPad, and I think the problem that Apple has, is for the iPad to really grow and become what it could be, it would have to replace something in Apple's lineup, and they don't want to do that. So why does it exist? The iPad is no longer useful as a bigger iPhone, especially when the screen of the iPad mini and the Pro Max are like within a couple of inches of one another. Once Apple was able to put a desktop/laptop CPU inside the iPad, they created an existential problem for both the iPad and themselves. If the iPad is as powerful as a MacBook, why isn't it as capable as a MacBook? The differences at this point are artificial, and in many ways the iPad is the better device, but it's being forced to be less by Apple. iPad OS has never become a viable alternative to Mac OS, and Mac OS is still the best overall computing experience on an Apple device. But it doesn't seem like that should be the case. It's crazy to think that the iPad Pro and the MacBook Air exist in the same price range. You can get a 13-inch iPad Pro and a 13-inch MacBook Air for basically the same price. And then you can kit the iPad Pro out to be virtually the same computer as the iPad Air if you pony up $350 for the Magic Keyboard, and then you have a computer that runs a mobile operating system with a pencil. And that's a shame. That's really a shame. What Apple should have done, what they need to do, but what they'll likely never do, is somehow combine the iPad Pro 13-inch and 11-inch and the MacBook Air. What does that look like? I don't know. The MacBook Air is their most popular computer, so they're not going to ditch that. But that leaves the iPad sitting over in the corner, the redheaded stepchild of Apple's lineup, where they keep it artificially less productive, less effective than it could be. Once you buy a keyboard and the Apple Pencil, you're no longer looking at two devices that are about the same price. The iPad is more expensive than the MacBook Air, and that's more money for the machine that is less capable. And yes, you could argue that the Pencil makes it a different device or something like that. I feel like the difference between the MacBook Air and the iPad Pro is artificial at this point. And Apple wants those two very distinct product categories, and they're not going to give it up. It seems like Apple is trying to, get the best of both worlds here, because they've convinced customers that they need an iPad and that they need a MacBook. And the truth is probably that you need one or the other, and you should choose. Apple should choose. The iPad Pros are just not different enough from the MacBook Airs at this point for there to be two different things. How does this look? I don't know. Start the MacBooks at where the Pro models are, and make a convertible laptop MacBook iPad Pro Air. I guess the reason I'm pushing for this is that iPad OS is just not as good as Mac OS for so many things. And it seems like spending more money to get the functionality of a MacBook with less of an operating system is a disservice to the consumer. So all the way up and down the line, the iPads are in this really weird nebulous space where they're very good devices that do some things very well, but they are ultimately hindered by a really subpar operating system that Apple refuses to bring up to muster with the other operating system of the similarly priced devices in the MacBook Airs. Maybe there's a place for the iPad mini, the iPad Air, the iPad, just a regular iPad. I mean, my wife had a regular iPad for years and used it for light web browsing, email, and reading books, and it was a perfect device for that. Did it have the nicest screen? No. It didn't have all the bells and whistles of the Pros, but, now she has an iPad Air, and there's not a lot of difference between those except in the price range. And, of course, what she uses it for has not changed at all. Apple has always made choosing products from their lineups very, very difficult. Because as soon as you decide, I want to buy this, the next thing up the road is only $100 more or whatever. And so suddenly you find yourself climbing the ladder till you're spending much more money than you have to. And Apple's the one that takes it straight to the bank, while you sit there with more expensive devices that you probably shouldn't have. Apple needs to do something with the iPads. There are too many models. There are too many sizes. I don't know. Make a cheap one. Make an expensive one. Or put pen support on the MacBook Air. I mean, it's confusing. I agree. It's very, very confusing. But let me assure you, from Apple's side, the confusion is a feature, not a bug. And I'd lay dollars to donuts that Apple's not going to change anything anytime soon. What do you think? Does the iPad actually fill a hole that needs to be filled in the Apple ecosystem? Do we need to have like 6 models of iPads, or could we just get by with like 2 or 3? Is the iPad Pro just a hobbled MacBook Air? Let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll have a boisterous discussion as always. Once again, hit the subscribe button if you've never been here before. If you have been here, thanks for coming back again. Until the next time, I'm out.